invitation. I am really happy to be here, and thank you, Cam, thank you, Abdullah. And I will talk about space traveling, and I will try to outline some issues, some moral issues, and I will try to discuss the issue of space traveling from an Islamic perspective. And I will present a paper that Lorella Ventura and I are writing, and then we can discuss some problems. And there are many Muslim scholars and approaches which do not have a principled stance against space travel. On the contrary, there is a tradition that admits that moral acceptability of space exploration programs. However, it is legitimate to question whether a program of space exploration and colonization could really be compatible with the principles of Islamic ethics. It is likely that the longer space journeys become, the more astronauts involved will need to undergo genetic modification interventions before departure, as our bodies are not suited only to living on other planets. However, even though initially genetic modification intervention will be conducted only on adults and those limited to the somatic line, it can be imagined that over time they will also be applied to germline, as children born in space will need protection from environmental conditions that could otherwise endanger their survival. Islamic ethics does not have any principled position against genetic modification interventions, and this applies not only to somatic ones, but also to those on the germline. In fact, the prohibition against manipulating creation is not an absolute principle, but must be balanced against the duty to alleviate disease and suffering, as well as, naturally, to protect human life. In these terms, genome editing intervention of a therapeutic nature constitutes a positive modification of creation, just like any surgical or therapeutic practice. The problem only arises when the intervention goes beyond its therapeutic purpose and aims to produce enhancements. In this case, the prevailing position in Islamic ethics is in fact that such modification can never be positive, that is moral, since it does not serve a therapeutic purpose and radically transform the design of creation. This would, in other words, be non-essential change and at the best mere embellishment. Moreover, those defending this position argued that the human being is already perfect in the form in which they were created and therefore does not require any further modification on our part. Indeed, due to their perfection, human beings should not alter themselves, but rather preserve their natural condition. Human limitation, furthermore, should not be altered or enhanced, as imperfection is part of divine plan and constitutes the essence of human nature. Improvement should focus on the moral aspect rather than the physical, as perfection does not reside in the body but in character. According to some views, however, enhancement intervention will not be incompatible with Islamic ethics, as there will be nothing wrong with wanting to improve one's abilities or dispositions. On the contrary, resorting to enhancement could even be seen as a duty if such an intervention contributes to achieving personal goals, the welfare of the community, and the realization of the principles of justice and progress promoted by Islamic ethics. According to Kant, if everything that happens in the world occurs with God's permission, then we cannot present principled reasons against human enhancement, acting responsibly while considering the consequences of our actions on social welfare, justice, and peace is appropriate, but this should not exclude the possibility of using intervention that cannot improve our disposition. The idea that Islam could be compatible with a redesign of humanity is also defended by Roy Jackson, who asserts that we have a duty to use technologies to eliminate pain, suffering, poverty, and injustice. Currently, however, as Cam says, the position advocating the permissibility of human enhancement remain marginal in the Islamic debate, which tend to take an outright stance of opposition toward any transhumanist project. A principled stance against human enhancement currently seems incompatible with space exploration and settlement programs, as these require genetically enhanced astronauts. Now I will talk about reproduction in space. Apart from issues strictly concerning genetic modifications, space exploration and settlement could still depend on reproductive technologies that may appear as at least controversial from the perspective of Islamic ethics. The new settlements that we create on other planets will only be able to become stable and prosperous colonies if they are capable of maintaining or increasing the number of inhabitants required to perform the various activities and functions within the community. In space, though, sexual reproduction may be unsuccessful, or in any case less successful than assisted reproduction, regardless of the reproductive technique used. In this case, the best scenario we can imagine is one in which people wishing to have a child in the new settlement realize this project of theirs by using their own gametes. We do not yet know, however, whether exposure to cosmic radiation and environmental conditions, for instance, reduced gravitational force, on other planets could in the long run have irreversible consequences on astronauts' reproductive capabilities. It is possible, after all, that a long stay on another planet reduces or brings to zero the possibility of having offspring with their own gametes, regardless of the technique employed. Moreover, even if the colonists retain the same reproductive capacity as they had on leaving the Earth, it is possible that after a long stay in space, the risk of transmitting serious genetic abnormalities increases for those wishing to have a child with their gametes. In such cases, the only way to have a healthy child will be to resort to assisted reproduction techniques, produce a certain number of embryos, and ultimately select those that do not present genetic abnormalities. The fact that assisted reproduction techniques may need to be used in space does not pose a problem for Islamic ethics, as from this perspective, it is permissible to use reproductive technologies when sexual reproduction is not possible. In space, however, the use of assisted reproduction will not be an exception, but rather a necessity for all those who wish to have a child. It is therefore legitimate to ask whether this change could alter the self-perception of individuals living on other planets, their relationship with technology, and influence the very concept of parenthood in the long term. In this case, it would represent a morally significant transformation that the Islamic perspective would also need to confront and critically reflect upon. If we hypothesize that in space, due to the risk of genetic abnormalities, it might be necessary to resort not only to assisted reproduction intervention, but also to pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, the selection and destruction of embryo could become another moral issue. Some jurists maintain that even before the 120th day, abortion is not permitted because the embryo should be treated as a person from the moment of conception. In the case of embryo selection, no genetic modification takes place, which might suggest that this practice does not interfere with creation. However, it should be noted that the intention behind the intervention is not therapeutic, but rather enhancement focus. In this case, say, for instance, Chin and al., the aim of PGT is neither to cure genetic disease or to prevent transmitting them to the offspring. The purpose is rather to optimize the prospective child's intelligence and other socially desirable traits. And then, in the end, we have the issue related with the artificial womb. Finally, even if the population, if a new space settlement were able to reproduce without the need for donor gametes, both pregnancy and childbirth could endanger not only the unborn child, but also the women. That is, we can imagine that people living on Mars or the Moon could have children using their own gametes or by importing their gametes stored on Earth prior to their departure for space. However, the problem of pregnancy and childbirth will still remain. In space with reduced or completely absent gravity, carrying a pregnancy to term or giving birth could be very risky for women. However, for Islamic ethics, the artificial womb remains highly controversial technology. The primary concern is that the artificial uterus might compromise the unsoulment of the embryo, which, according to Islamic tradition, occurs between the 40th and 120th day, or that it might interfere in some way with the natural gestational process. However, the use of artificial uterus can be morally justified by the principle of beneficence, as with other devices employed in medicine. Moreover, the artificial uterus can help save very premature babies or assist women who are unable to have children or whose pregnancy and childbirth would pose significant risk to their health. Unlike surrogacy, the artificial uterus does not involve other individuals who might compromise the sanctity of the marital bond or create confusion in familial relationship. In space, however, it is debatable whether its use can be considered morally acceptable. Its use might indeed be permitted in situations of extreme necessity, but it does not appear morally acceptable when the woman is fertile and in perfect health. It is also true that in space, even women without fertility issue might face perhaps insurmountable difficulties in carrying a pregnancy to term. Moreover, a pregnancy could compromise their health or even endanger their lives. However, in this case, it does not seem legitimate to speak of a condition of necessity. A healthy woman could choose to postpone pregnancy either by completing her space mission and giving birth after returning to Earth, or by deciding not to pursue a life in space at all. Perhaps women born on Mars or on the Moon might claim to be in a condition of necessity as they didn't choose to live in space and might not even have the option to return to Earth one day. Women who come from Earth and have the option to return to Earth are in a different situation and have more choices. Women from Earth, on the other hand, can decide whether to participate in a long mission or a shorter one, and they also have the possibility of returning to the planet, thus enjoy greater freedom of choice regarding motherhood and its implication. Moreover, acknowledging the moral legitimacy of using artificial wombs for healthy women in space makes it increasingly difficult to justify prohibiting ectogenesis for healthy women in other circumstances, whether on Earth. The use of the artificial womb in space could ultimately be incompatible with the value that Islam places not only on motherhood and the suffering of a woman endures during pregnancy and childbirth, but also on a conception of motherhood that is intrinsically tied to childbirth. No one can be considered a mother except the one who gave birth to them. Moreover, the potential widespread adoption of artificial wombs would have other significant consequences for the concept of the heterosexual family defended by Islam, as one birth is not longer biologically tied to childbirth. Even a single man or a gay couple could conceive a child. So, in conclusion, space traveling has a lot of moral issues, a lot of philosophical and moral issues that we have to consider, and it is time to start a debate and a reflection. Thank you very much.